Welcome everybody, my name is Dennis Levin. I'm a retired pastor here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible class where we are studying today chapters 29 and 30 in the book of Deuteronomy. Chapters 29 and 30 are of a piece, and you could have made one very long chapter out of the two, but it is the farewell address of Moses to the people. And we've seen other farewell addresses of Moses to the people, and they basically say virtually the same thing. But this one is unique and very pertinent to the generation that it was written for. Not that Moses spoke it in the time frame that it was written down. A lot of the Mosaic teachings are in his final address, but it's obvious from the way it's phrased that he's talking to a community that's already gone through some stuff. So let's take a look at what Moses has to say. I'm going to be reading pretty much the whole thing, and then we're going to get into a discussion of what it means, the implications for it. But I think they're profound, and they affect us today. They affect how we perceive the goal of Christianity, even. So, these are the words of the covenant that the Lord commanded Moses to make with the Israelites in the land of Moab, in addition to the covenant that he made with them at Horeb. Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, "You have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh, to all his servants, and to all the land. The great trials your eyes saw, the signs and those great wonders, but to this day the Lord has not given you a mind to understand, or eyes to see, or ears to hear." Okay. You've been dumb a long time. "I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. The clothes on your back have not worn out, and the sandals on your feet have not worn out. You have not eaten bread, you have not drunk wine or strong drink, so that you may know that I am the Lord your God." Okay. We had a presentation from a gentleman who went over to Saudi Arabia and did an examination of actually the most likely site for Mount Horeb. And one of the things that's on there are indications, ancient indications, that these were the Israeli people. And one of the things that was in there was a carving on the rock of sandals, and it was a reminder that their sandals had not worn out in the 40 years that they were in the wilderness. Okay, so you don't see that as an indicator for other cultures. It's specifically into this, and dates from the period that we're talking about. So it's more of a confirmation that this actually was the area for Mount Horeb. When you came to this place, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan came out against you for battle, but we defeated them. We took their land and gave it as an inheritance to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. These are the tribes that settled on the east side of the Jordan. Therefore, diligently observe the words of this covenant in order that you may succeed in everything you do. You stand assembled today, all of you, before the Lord your God, the leaders of your tribes, your elders and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children and your women, and the aliens who are in your camp, both those who cut your wood and those who draw your water." So you can see what they're doing with the aliens in their land. Okay? Things that we say the migrants should be doing for us today. I don't know where we get that from. Anyway. "To enter the covenant of the Lord your God, sworn by an oath which the Lord your God is making with you today, in order that he may establish you today as his people, and that he may be your God as he promised you, and as he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I am making this covenant, sworn by an oath, not only with you who stand here today before the Lord our God, but also with those who are not here with us today. You know how we lived in the land of Egypt, and how we came through the midst of the nations through which you passed. You have seen their detestable things, the filthy idols of wood and stone, of silver and gold. There were among them. It may be that there is among you a man or woman or a family or tribe whose heart is already turning away from the Lord your God to serve gods of those nations. It may be that there is among you a root sprouting poisonous and bitter growth. All who hear the words of this oath and bless themselves, thinking in their hearts, we are safe, even though we go our own stubborn ways, thus bringing disaster on moist and dry alike. The Lord will be unwilling to pardon them, for the Lord's anger and passion will smoke against them. All the curses written in this book will descend on them, and the Lord will blot out their names from under heaven. What does this mean? It means, and this is in line with what Jesus was saying, that your birthright is not a guarantee. Okay? And I would say your membership in a church is not your guarantee. Okay? Nor is your profession of faith a guarantee. It's how you do it. Okay? All right. The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for calamity in accordance with the curses of the covenant written in this book of the law, which we read in the previous chapters, by the way. If you really like to hear about curses, then go on back to chapter 28 and have fun. The next generation, your children who rise up after you, as well as the foreigner who comes from a distant country, will see the devastation of that land and the afflictions with which the Lord has afflicted it. Okay, notice that he's talking sort of in the past tense. So he's talking about stuff way ahead of him that already happened. All right. All its soil is burned out by sulfur and salt, nothing planted, nothing sprouting, unable to support any vegetation, like the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord destroyed in his fierce anger. And they, indeed, all the nations will wonder, why has the Lord done thus to this land? What caused this great display of anger? They will conclude it is because they abandoned the covenant of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, which made them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. They turned and served other gods, worshiping them, gods whom they had not known, and whom he had not allotted to them. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against the land, bringing on it every curse written in this book. The Lord uprooted them from their land in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is now the case. So, while he was talking about what will happen, he is saying, see, it happened. So we're talking now past tense, all right? The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things belong to us and to our children forever, to observe all the words of the law, which, by the way, today on Passover, they are doing just that. Okay? So chapter 30. When all these things have happened to you, the blessings and the curses that I have set before you, if you call them to mind among the nations where the Lord your God has driven you, and return to the Lord your God, you and your children, obey him with all your heart, with all your soul, just as I am commanding you, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you, gathering you again from all the nations among whom the Lord your God has scattered you. Even if you are exiled to the ends of the world, from there the Lord your God will gather you, from there he will bring you back. The Lord your God will bring you into the land that your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. I've seen this happen in my lifetime.
Is he talking about Israel?
He's talking about Israel. Okay, it's taken a while, okay, from our standpoint. Moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, in order that you may live. The Lord your God will put all these curses on your enemies and on the adversaries who took advantage of you. Then you shall again obey the Lord, observing all his commandments that I am commanding you today. And the Lord your God will make you abundantly prosperous in all your undertakings, in the fruit of your body, and the fruit of your livestock, and the fruit of your soil. For the Lord will again take delight in prospering you, just as he delighted in prospering your ancestors. When you obey the Lord your God, observing his commandments and decrees that are written in his book of the law, because you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Okay, I'm going to pause here. What was the primary motivation for the people to obey the law? In most of what we've read in the Pentateuch, what was the reason why the people should obey the law?
So they would prosper.
So they would prosper, so that they wouldn't be cursed, okay? So what we're talking about, you have to obey the law in order to avoid the consequences of curses that would be brought upon you if you did not, okay? This is the hellfire and brimstone methodology that we are so familiar with in Christianity, okay? On the other hand, there's a part in here that speaks to us, especially in the Wesleyan tradition, okay? Moreover, the Lord your God, this is verse 6, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, in order that you may live. What does this mean? Well, what we call sanctification. Okay? So that through the power, now he doesn't mention Trinity by any means, but in the Wesleyan tradition, our understanding is that by the power of the Holy Spirit, we can be transformed. And that transformation that takes place in our character makes us prone to want to do the will of God rather than to fight it. Okay, so the sanctifying process is a process that brings us closer to God and closer in natural motivation to serve the Lord. Okay? So if you have the hellfire and brimstone approach, the reason why you get saved is so you don't go to hell. Okay? In the Wesleyan tradition, the reason you get saved is so that you can do the will of God and bring the peace of God into the world. In other words, your salvation is a function of God's saving grace in society. You are saved for the purpose of making disciples of Jesus Christ, okay, for the salvation of the world. So what's happened to you is not all about you. What's happened to you is all about being a part of the kingdom of God. In our prayer, in the Lord's Prayer, you know, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We become a part of that process. That prayer is not so that God will come down, as many want to do in the rapture or something like that. God will come down and fix it all, okay? What God is doing is God is fixing it all by fixing us. And through us, that remedy, that conformity to the will of God begins to permeate societies. And it's been a long, fraught with ignorance, fraught with malice, fraught with corruption. It has been a long process for Christianity to really orient itself on bringing the will of God into the world peaceably. Okay? There have been Christians all along in every generation who were truly Christian who had this in their hearts. Okay? There were other people who called themselves Christians who went out and slaughtered people because they weren't Christian. We are very, very slow learners. But if you take a look at the contrast between Christianity in the Middle Ages and Christianity as it's being practiced generally, especially in the United States, you'll find that we are much more peacefully oriented, that we are much more gracious even to people who do not agree with us, okay? That we are more generous to the poor than any society has ever been. And it's because of our Judeo-Christian roots, okay? But it took a long time for the leaves to come out from those roots. Okay, we have made horrendous mistakes down through the ages. Okay? But the thing is, as we look back on it, the blessing is that we say, oh, that was a mistake. That was wrong. Those are standards of behavior for Christianity that we do not accept today. Okay, now in some countries they still do. In some expressions of faith they still do. And even in this country, you'll find people who call themselves Christians who are not necessarily that gracious. Okay, it's a process. It's a process. But what we have seen down through generations and centuries and bad decisions and lessons learned, that we have come a long way. We are not at the end of it yet, by any means, okay? And like I have said, there are people who are praying for Christ to return. If Christ returns, it means that the church has utterly failed. And who's God going to be mad at the most? Okay, so I don't pray for Christ to return real quick. I just don't.
Does verse 5 show a justification of Israel being
Reestablished?
created?
Yes. Oh, and I think it's important for us to look at this too.
Well, then
Okay.
that would really be, I'm not sure what the word would be. The Lord was telling everybody then,
Yes,
so that
it is a
Actually,
fulfillment of prophecy.
the Bible, who quoted that? Moses?
This is supposed to be a speech of Moses.
Okay.
Okay. We have seen the fulfillment of this in our own lifetime. Okay. Now, there are a couple of ways to look at the history of Israel. They don't always conform to what you see prophesied about Israel. Okay. You can look at Israel and say, okay, these were people who fell away from the Lord, and because they fell away from the Lord, the Assyrians came in and whacked them. And then the Babylonians came in and whacked them. You can say that, okay? On the other hand, as a military historian, I can tell you that if the Assyrians ever wanted to whack them, they could. And if the Babylonians ever wanted to whack them, they could, okay? Militarily, Israel didn't have the wherewithal to defend itself. So they have a theocentric view of history, whereas someone who is secular could say, well, you know, this was going to happen, regardless of whether they followed the law or not. These nations that came in were much more powerful and much more militant than Israel. Fast forwarding away from, okay, you know, understand now, what's being said here really has to do with the people returning from the Babylonian captivity and the Persian occupation, okay? They didn't get as far as the Greeks, okay? They suffered horribly under the Greeks, and they suffered horribly under the Greeks because they were being faithful to the law. They did not become Greek, okay? And they didn't suffer the invasion of the Greeks because of falling away from the law. They suffered the Greeks because the Greeks wiped out, overtook the Persian Empire. And when they overtook the Persian Empire, this is part of their territory. So they didn't, I mean, these people were not in a position to defend themselves militarily in any way. And the Greeks assumed control all the way from Iran all the way down to Egypt. And so this is just part of the territory that the Greeks took over under Alexander. And after Alexander died, they became much more oppressive. So we can't relate what happened to them under the Greeks to what Moses is saying here, because that invasion had nothing to do with them falling away from the law. Okay? And then after that, the Romans took over. Okay? And that had nothing to do with them falling away from the law. In fact, the Maccabees were reestablishing the law, okay, in Israel after they kicked out the Greeks, or they tried to. They weren't entirely successful. They needed help. They called on the Romans to help them out, and the Romans gladly did. And when they did, they just came in and took over the territory. Okay, once you open the door, there it goes. And the Romans, while they tolerated Judaism, the imposition of Romanism on those who were practicing Jewish law, the Roman culture was an affront to Judaism. Here again, the people were trying to reestablish themselves in accordance with the law of God, and they got annihilated by the Romans. Okay, that's the second diaspora, and they came in and they just took everybody, and Diocletian depopulated the area, brought them to Rome, sold them as slaves, used the money to build the Colosseum, and but that wasn't because the people fell away from the law. It's just because Rome was big and powerful, and they didn't have a way to defend themselves.
So them never falling away from the law has been like a detriment to them.
No.
I mean,
Well, physically, yeah. I mean, they didn't conform to the occupation forces. Yeah. And of course there was a pushback. So while
it kind of makes me think about, Nazi Germany,
yes,
about how they, that they've been accused of not fighting back.
that's right. And that's one of the reasons why Yiddish is not welcome in Israel, because it's considered the language of a people who simply rolled over and let themselves be persecuted.
Well, I mean, it makes you think, why, I mean, if they were doing God's will, or, I don't know, it seems kind of.
Okay, now what they want to do after the Holocaust, okay, what they wanted to do after the Holocaust is we need some place that is our sanctuary. And they began forcing the issue by illegal immigration into Palestine under British control. So it went from the Greeks to the Romans to the Ottomans and then to the British. But there was no Palestinian nation, it was just an area.
What language do they speak in Israel?
Now, Hebrew,
Hebrew.
modern Hebrew. They speak modern Hebrew, not ancient Hebrew, modern Hebrew. Okay, and when Hebrew is taught in seminary, it's modern Hebrew is taught in seminary, not ancient Israel, not ancient.
So when the British took over, did they let the Hebrews worship?
Yes. Yeah, they had freedom of religion in the territories that they occupied. So Judaism could be practiced, Islam could be practiced, Christianity could be practiced in the area of Palestine. Okay, but the illegal immigration of Jews from Europe threatened the Islamic population. They saw themselves becoming overwhelmed. Plus which you had the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was an SS officer in the German military.
Do what?
The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was made an SS officer and had his own brigade in Palestine.
What was he?
He's Islam. He was an Islamic leader of Palestine.
Okay, so he wasn't Jewish.
Oh no, he was Islamic.
Okay.
He was Islamic, and he wore the SS uniform and everything, and did an awful lot to increase the animosity of the Muslim population against the Jews who were coming into that territory. Okay.
What happened to him?
I don't think that he was ever really held to account. I think that he remained a great Muslim leader in that area, and one of the reasons why we're seeing all this animosity today is by the education system that he instituted, the cultural system that he instituted, and the resentments that he instituted in Palestine. But Islam and Judaism have coexisted periodically very well. They coexisted fairly well in Spain, okay, prior to Ferdinand and Isabella taking back the territory. They coexisted reasonably well in North Africa and in Palestine. You didn't see uprisings so much against each other. They do have an awful lot of cultural similarities, and especially on a scholarly level, you saw a lot of interaction between Judaism and Islam. But the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem really went at it hard, and he's one of the reasons why there's so much animosity. It's ingrained in the way that they're taught. So what we see today going on in Gaza is direct result of generations of animosities that have been built up over the years. But Israel, as a nation, as a Jewish nation, adheres to the Mosaic Law. And they enforce it. And while they tolerate other religions, you're not allowed to proselyte. So you can't, it's against the law for a Christian to try to convert a Jew or a Muslim. It's against the law for a Muslim to try to convert a Christian.
See, to me, that just gives Judaism, I mean, being Jewish, a negative feeling, all of this.
Well, you're coming at it from a Christian standpoint, but
Right.
look how basically incredibly tolerant they are of religions that have horribly persecuted them. I mean, Nazi Germany was a Christian nation. Okay, and all the anti-Semitism that you saw in Russia and all throughout Europe, that's by Christians. And yet Christianity is tolerated. I'm surprised it is, but it is. And you take a look at how hideous Islam has expressed itself, a portion of Islam has expressed itself. Now, you will find a lot of Muslims are participating in the Israeli Defense Force because they actually enjoy more freedoms in Israel than they would if they were in an Islamic country. They can participate in government, they can vote, you know. There are Judaic laws that are immutable. It's like, you know, changing the Declaration of Independence. There are some things you just don't do. But I think it's remarkable that Israel is as tolerant as it is with other religions. Historically, you know. But then, again, they are taught to look after the alien in their land. So if the alien is living peaceably in their land, then all the benefits that accrue to Judaism should accrue to the alien in the land. So Moses includes them in this. But you can see from Moses' last speech that he's really talking to the generation that came back from the Babylonian captivity. So, because he's talking past tense about things that have already happened, that Moses didn't live long enough to see. Okay, real quick. Surely the commandment I'm commanding you today is not too hard for you, for it is far away. Nor is it too far away. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven and get it for us, that we may hear it and observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the other side of the sea for us and get it for us so that we may hear it and observe it. No, the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart. Now, you're not talking about the phylacteries, okay, that are external. You have internalized the law, so no matter where you go, you carry that with you, and you carry it in your heart. And that's the same kind of message that we advocate for Christians, okay? See, I've set you before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving your Lord God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Choose life so that your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. All right. You are keeping the covenant not to keep yourselves safe. You are keeping the covenant to keep future generations safe. Okay? And while we look at Israel today and say they don't look very safe, believe me, it's a long way from where they were before. Okay? I have seen militarily there is no reason why the state of Israel should exist. But it does. All right. Well, God bless you all. See you next week. Well, I won't see you next week because it's going to be Easter, and we're going to have a breakfast here. We're going to have a great service for Easter. Come on out and join us. Don't just watch us online. But if you have some things to say online, then please call me or email me at revlev@ncc.umc.org. NCC at revlev@ncc.umc.